All right, folks, what's happening? Here we are again. Here we are again, the Real Life Real Estate Investing Show, where we talk about real life real estate situations, but we bring you real life real estate solutions. I'm your host, Glenn Glasper, affectionately known as Mr. Dial Out of a Dime, and our co-host.
How y'all doing this morning? Thank y'all for joining us. It's Candace Briggs here. Again, thanks y'all. Thank you all for joining us. Please stay tuned and ask your questions. We're here to answer them.
Listen, if y'all better ask some really good questions today, because we got none other than the brain himself. Mr. Don DeRosa's in the house with us today. Don, how you doing, man?
Thank you, sir. Man, it's a pleasure to be here.
Definitely.
Thanks for coming on.
I was on your show. I guess it's been a while now.
It's been a while. It's been a while. Yeah. We go. This is part 2 of 10. All right, so we'll be right back after this. So stick around. We'll be right back with you.
Let's go.
All right, we're back. Hey, listen, we're going to be talking about subject to real estate investing.
What?
And it's going to be huge. It's going to be huge because
My favorite subject.
I know. Look, first of all, it's Don's favorite subject. And second of all, I'm not going to give it all away.
Let's back up. What is subject to? What is subject to?
Well, in the easiest terms, it's when the homeowner deeds the property, transfers ownership to you.
Okay.
But not the debt.
Gotcha.
The debt stays in their name and basically it stays on their credit report and you don't have to qualify.
There you
So you get the ownership, but I like to say not the liability, even though that's kind of a misnomer. Yeah, you do have an ethical and a moral obligation to make that payment, but you don't have a legal financial
responsibility.
Yeah.
Which ties into what we talked about last week when we ended. Remember, we were talking about how to do everything with ethics and to make sure when you're doing these deals that you're operating from a high standard. It's not just you on the line, it's homeowners on the line. There's a lot of different pieces coming on, and involved. So always operating at a high level. So that's a good tie-in last week.
The thing I tell all of my students is subject to is the most powerful technique there is in real estate.
Absolutely.
Because you can control an enormous amount of real estate and own it,
but
have no debt on paper.
Yeah.
Meaning, like right now, if you go down and you borrow money from a bank, you're only going to do that depending on where you are, in the real estate cycle. Sometimes your debt income won't allow you to buy any more.
Sure.
Others, banks may allow you to go up to even 10 unless you change products to a more commercial product. But on a normal lending situation, you may only have 10 or be allowed to buy 10. There for a long time, it was 4.
Yeah.
And it's starting to get a little bit lax.
Sure.
But with subject to, you can buy
There's
thousands.
no limit.
There's no limit.
Yeah.
But I tell people, look, when you sit down with a homeowner and you promise to make their payment, you have a moral obligation and an ethical obligation to do that. Because you're promising to make their payment. And if you can't, then probably subject to is not
the best route.
Is not the best route for you. You should probably do wholesaling or something other than that if you can't do that. If you can't make that payment. But it is by far the best way to do it, because I don't need, if I buy your house subject to, and you owe $300,000 on it, and it's only worth $400,000, I don't have to go get $300,000 to buy that house. I can just take it over subject to. Okay, maybe make some back payments up, or put some repairs in it, but very little money.
So the question I would have, well, of course, for the audience, would it be So okay, let me ask a more elementary question, just to make sure folks don't get what we're talking about confused. So subject to, is there any similarity to what's commonly known as an assumable mortgage?
Well, of course, there's a similarity there because, I mean, you could make an argument that you are assuming their debt because you're making their payments.
Right.
There's a difference between an informal assumption, what we call subject to, and a formal assumption, which people tend to kind of get confused. A formal assumption is when I go down to Bank of America. I'll just use them as an example.
Sure.
You go down to Bank of America and you actually qualify. You actually sign paperwork, and they vet you just like you would anybody else.
Right.
And they approve you to assume that loan. What a lot of people don't realize is when you assume someone else. So if I were to assume your loan, if it was an assumable loan to begin with, do you know you're still, even when I assume it, you're still responsible. If I stop making payments, you're still responsible for that for a period of time.
Wow.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yes.
I didn't.
So they hold two people accountable for a period of time. After a certain amount of time, then then you fall off.
Okay.
But for a short period of time, at least that's how they used to be. A subject to, you are assuming their loan because you're going to be making their payments, but you're not doing a formal assumption. You're just taking it over subject to the existing financing, and then you're going to make the payments directly to the bank.
Right. So the bank will take anybody's money, huh?
Yeah, that's another miscalculation out there.
Okay.
A lot of times people go, well, they automatically assume, and we haven't gotten into this. I'm sure one of your questions is going to be a due on sale clause. Should you be afraid?
Yes, of
should
course.
you be afraid of a due on sale clause? And for those of you that don't know what a due on sale clause is, every mortgage, probably since the late 80s, most of them they're no longer assumable. There are still a few out there that you can get that are assumable, very, very few. But most, if not all, mortgages now have what's called a due on sale clause in the security instrument that's given. So let's talk about the paperwork briefly.
Yeah.
If I were to buy your house and you had a house for sale, and let's just make math easy and say you were selling it for $100,000.
Okay.
If I reach in my pocket and give you $100,000, you would give me what as ownership? Do you know?
The deed to the house.
Not just a deed, a warranty deed.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's going to pass ownership over to me.
Right.
You take my money, you go on your way, I get the ownership, the deed gives me ownership.
Absolutely.
But if I didn't have $100,000, I'd have to go down to the Bank of Glen here.
Yeah.
I like that.
And I'd have to borrow money.
Right.
Okay. Now, Glen is going to make me typically put some kind of skin in the game.
Right.
Call that a down payment.
Sure.
And now, this is where most people don't understand the process. When I put the down payment, he's going to get, let's say I put 10% down.
Okay.
So that's $10,000. Okay, so I give him $10,000. I sign a promissory note for 90. Right? So he makes payments. He pays you the 90, and you go away.
Right.
Well, now I have a promissory note for $90,000.
Right.
Now, inside that promissory note is the terms of the loan: 30 years, 5.5%. Here's my payment. It may say that I'm required to do escrow of taxes and insurance. All that is going to be spelled out. Now, if that document is the only document I sign, what happens if I stop paying?
Like with any loan, they come back and take the asset. No.
All
right. What happens?
No, and that's what a lot of people don't understand, and that's where
There's no security.
Subject to is all about the paperwork.
Yeah.
And understand. There's so many people online that are, offering subject to courses and materials, and you have to be very, very careful. Well, you have to be very careful who you listen to, because not all paperwork is created equal. And if you don't do the right paperwork, you can get yourself in a lot of trouble, and you could lose that asset.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay. So,
of course, you're not talking about anybody in particular, right?
No, I'm not going to name any names. Let's put it that way. But they're just, all I tell people is, look, when you go on a lot of these Facebook groups that, anybody can create a Facebook group.
Yeah.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you have expertise in it.
Absolutely.
It doesn't mean anything. It just means that I went out there and I want people to come. So I'm going to say whatever I need to say to get them to come to my Facebook group. So just be careful with that. That's all I'm going to say. So if I just did the promissory note, just a promise to pay.
Right.
There's no security to that asset at all.
Right.
So that's why a bank not only will allow you to sign, they not only will want you to sign that, but they will also want you to sign a security instrument.
Okay.
Now that instrument, depending on the state you're in, could be a security deed here in Georgia. That's what we call them.
Yeah.
Could be a deed of trust, or it could be a mortgage.
Right.
Those three documents are all security documents. It secures or places a lien on the property.
For sure.
And depending on the state, depends on what you call it. If I don't make so inside that security document, now the note gives you all the payment terms.
Okay.
Interest rate, time, length of time, so on and so forth, all the particulars. The security deed or security document places a lien on the property and basically secures the bank. You secures that property to the note.
Correct.
So it does a cross collateralization, right?
Yes.
And it says, if you don't make this payment based on this note, we're going to, you're basically pledging the property as collateral. And sometimes it doesn't always have to be the property you live in.
For sure.
It could be other collateral. Now, most banks want the property you're living in. But if you had significant assets and you said, I want this house free and clear, I'm going to give you collateral to another property, and it had equal or greater value to it, they could collateralize it there as well.
Gotcha.
It doesn't really matter. But the point is, if that note, if you stop making that payment, whatever you've secured with that instrument is in jeopardy of foreclosing. Inside that document is what we call a due on sale clause. That's where that clause is buried.
Right.
And that clause simply says, if the bank or if the seller transfers the property without paying the loan off, the bank may, at its option, call it due, full, and payable. Now, the operative word is at its option. Now, I've been doing this a very long time. Can't even count how many subject to deals I've done. And I've never, knock on wood, I've never had any loans even remotely close to call due. And I've never had any students that I'm aware of ever have a loan called due. But that goes down to having the right documentation and doing it the right way and having the right paperwork to protect yourself so that you do that. There's a lot of things that we do to help protect that, like placing the property into a trust and so on and so forth.
Right.
So there's a lot of little intricacies, power of attorneys, different things, CYA letters, all those things protect you. So
The purchase.
yeah, so a subject to, I could do this 100 times in a month, and not a single one of those would show up on my credit report.
Which is awesome.
And CY, for those of you that are watching, CYA is English for cover your assets.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So you say you've done many of them, and your students have as well. What's your number one source, or how are you finding your subject to deals?
That's a great question. That is a question that I get asked every time I take on any student or someone comes and buys anything from me.
So Don, how do you find your deals?
That's a question that I can't answer, because everything works if you do.
Okay.
And I'll tell you
agree with
how
that.
typically they come
Man,
to us.
that's a bar right there, man.
Right.
Go
ahead.
do it. I'm gonna do a beat for you. Go ahead.
Everything works if you do.
Right.
So this is how we
That's facts,
like
though. That's facts.
networking gets us a lot of subject twos.
Okay.
And because you know someone who knows someone that's in trouble,
Sure.
and you say, hey, they're in trouble, can you help them?
Yeah.
So networking is it's a very underrated source of deals.
Yeah.
Very underrated.
Yeah.
But you have to be in the space long enough and tell as many people what you do for that to be effective.
For sure.
Okay. But that's one of the most effective ways to get leads. We do a lot of pre-foreclosures, we do a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of that stuff. We gravitate towards marketing towards motivated sellers, such as probates, pre-foreclosures, bankruptcies. Bankruptcies can sometimes be challenging because if you file bankruptcy, you get put on a national list.
Sure.
It's called PACER, right?
Okay.
And that anybody can subscribe to that and see, hey, so-and-so filed bankruptcy. Well, it's not that you filed bankruptcy that we care about. It's when you don't make the payment. So there's two types of bankruptcies out there. There's Chapter 7 and Chapter 13.
Okay.
Chapter 7 is total liquidation.
For consumers.
Chapter 13, what's that?
The consumer bankruptcy is Chapter 7 and 11.
Yeah, Chapter 7 and Chapter 13.
Yes.
Chapter 7, total liquidation. You throw your hands up and say, Uncle, I'm done. And under the homestead, you're allowed $10,000 each person living in a home.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Typically. Now, if the court deems that you have no equity in your home, they will allow you to keep the home.
Keep the home. Okay.
In Chapter 13, that's what we call reorganization.
Okay.
That's where they put all their debts and everything into a bucket, and they separate secured versus unsecured, and then they create a plan.
Okay.
Well, if the person doesn't, and they go back, so let's just say my mortgage and my car payment is $1,500 a month.
Yeah.
Well, with all the debt and all the other stuff, credit cards and stuff, well, the bankruptcy trustee may say, okay, well, you need to pay, not only do you need to pay your secured debts, the $1,500, well, now we need to add $800 on top of that. Yeah. Right? Well, that's where people get lost.
I can imagine.
So when they file bankruptcy and they don't make those payments, the secured debt, so the mortgage company calls and says, or files a motion that says, hey, you're not abiding by bankruptcy. We are requesting what's called a lift of stay. Okay. When that happens, that's a court proceeding document, and that gets filed with that gets filed with the bankruptcy court, which is a federal court. It becomes notice for everybody.
Okay.
Well, we see that on PACER that says this loan or this person has been forced out of bankruptcy because of non-payment. Well, that shows up. So if you start calling these folks, what you will be, you may get some frustrated individuals or some angry individuals because they're like, hey, you shouldn't be calling me.
Yeah.
And then you have to break the news to them. I'm sorry, but it's public notice that you unfortunately
didn't keep up your end of the bargain.
You didn't make the payment. Well, that's where knowing the right script and having the right ease into that conversation comes in handy.
Right.
Same thing with pre-foreclosures. Understanding how to talk. A lot of people will go, they'll call you and they'll say, hey, I'm interested in buying your house. They'll call a pre-foreclosure.
That's not the right way to do it, guys.
That's the worst way you could do it, because 99% of the people out there that are in pre-foreclosure, they don't want to sell. They want to keep.
They want to keep it one way or the other.
So what I teach is I tell them, you're not trying to buy, you're trying to help.
Absolutely.
We would like to help you keep your home.
Sure.
And we do. We try, because think about it. If you have 100 people, you're not going to buy all 100.
Right.
Okay. But if I can save 95 of those and have a potential of buying 5, I've made 95 people happy and 5 people happy, because they realize after we've gone through everything that they really can't save it.
Sure.
So I would rather work with the people who now understand, okay, we're at the end of our rope. We need to do something. and save the ones that we can, because, you know, they tell two friends and so on. And so that's goes back to the network and referrals that we get people all the time that says, hey, call these people right here.
Right.
They helped me keep my home. They can do the same.
Absolutely. Which goes back to what we've been saying week after week. It's all about communication, setting the expectation from the beginning, and to understand this is a people business.
Definitely.
So learn how to talk to people, learn how to, like you said, not just I want to buy your house. How can I help you?
Exactly.
And just understand that whatever you're trying to get, whether it's the asset or whether helping someone first, you'll be rewarded as long as your heart is in the right place and you're trying to do right by the homeowner. So,
well, what I tell people when they come to me, I say, look, everybody says I'm an investor. So if I ask you what's your profession, you say I'm an investor. No, you're not. You are a problem solver. And if you can make that distinction in your mind and go, you know, because everyone's like, okay, I'm buying real estate. No, you're solving ultimately you're buying real estate, but you're solving a problem first.
Right.
And if you don't understand what the problem, in order for you to buy that piece of real estate, because any investor, I mean, an investor in my mind is someone that goes online, looks at a house, puts a low offer, buys it, gets a loan, rents it out. And that's not what we do.
no.
That's not what we do. We go in and we try to solve people's problems. And in exchange for solving their problems, we buy houses at a lower price that we can take advantage of the equity.
Absolutely.
Well, that doesn't mean that it's a win-lose. That means it's a win-win. If you can solve their problem and in exchange get some equity out of it, that's all that matters.
Absolutely.
And that's really how it needs to be looked at.
Agreed. I agree.
Now you said you help people keep their homes. In the subject to situation, you allow them to keep it.
Nope. No, there's a difference.
Okay. I
We'll
want to make that distinction.
There's a difference. Nope. There's a difference. So if you were a customer, right? So I would sit down with you. You would contact us, or it might be us contacting you. You know, we do prospecting.
Right.
So we contact you and say, hey, you know, here's how I do it. I work with a company here in Georgia. I know this is going to be an unusual phone call, but we try to help people out of situations like yours. I noticed you were in foreclosure, and I'm looking to see.
I'm not in foreclosure. How did you get my business?
Well, they do say that. They say, well, how did you get my number?
Yeah.
Right.
Just say, well, I work for a company here in Georgia, and we work with individuals that are in distressed situations.
Right.
And that could be pre-foreclosure, could be bankruptcy, could be probate, could be a number of things. Not quite sure which one of these you fit in, but you were on my list to call today. And what I do is I call to see, we work with a bunch of homeowners to see if we can help them save their home. Would that be something that would be interesting to you? Now, I can't tell you how many times, if you have two phone calls, one person says, hey, I was in your neighborhood and I wanted to know if you interested in selling. And I call right side by side. They'll talk to me for 20, 30 minutes.
Absolutely.
The person that calls and says, hey, I'm interested in buying, they'll talk to them about 30 seconds.
Right.
Nope, not interested. If they make it that far.
Yeah.
I just want to interject for a moment. For those of you that are watching, you know, that are watching now or maybe watch this later, what he just said in that script is worth thousands of dollars.
Oh yeah.
I want to and because I want to make sure we make the value distinction, because oftentimes people are taught the opposite of that, of what you just said.
That's right.
They are not taught to have a personalized conversation. It's a scripted conversation, and the script is, I want to buy your house.
Yep.
Right. So I want to make sure people get that what you just shared with them is a whole nother, we can say whole nother, right? It's a whole nother level of personalization that allows you to continue to have that 30-minute conversation.
Well, think about it. How many times have you gotten a phone call from a telemarketer that's reading a script?
Yes.
And you go, oh, and you try to interrupt them to say, I'm usually pretty
That's the
nice.
part right there.
I'm usually pretty nice. So like my wife goes, just hang up. I'm like, okay, so because I understand cold calling, I understand all that, so it's not. So I say, look, I'm sorry, I'm not really interested. You know, please take me off your list. And they keep going.
Yep.
Well, if for some reason I don't stop them in enough time, they just keep reading.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
not even listening to.
Yeah, they're not
Right.
even listening
They're
to
just
you.
straight
So
script.
what I tell you is, if you really want to connect with someone, you have to listen to them.
Absolutely. I was going to say that
You
80%
have to
of making
listen,
any
and you have
sale
to
is
empathize
listening.
with them and understand. Okay, it's not just hearing them.
Right.
You have to listen.
Absolutely.
And you can't listen and read a script.
Real. That's real. Yeah.
Because I tell people, like, I have scripts. I can give you a script.
For sure.
Mhm.
For
I
sure.
can give you a script. But I'm going to tell you, if you're brand new at this, what's going to happen is when you get that first phone call on the phone and you start reading that, every word on that page is going to fall off the
And
page.
it's going to turn into something totally different.
And you're going to be like, you're either going
to.
to sound like you're reading it,
Yes.
because that script is never going to come across as natural.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Okay, so the person on the other line, when they hear you're not a natural person and not talking to them, you're just talking at them, they've already turned you off.
Yes.
So let me ask you, how do you tell your students to get more comfortable on the phone? So a lot of people are comfortable with scripts, right? And they provide a good guideline to a conversation. So how do you tell your students to get comfortable on the phone? Because there's a lot of people that don't like cold calling, right? So how do you get comfortable
So here's what I tell you. If you're brand new, just talk to them. There's a few, like, you don't need to know how much they owe.
Yeah.
You don't need to know what their payment is right away.
Okay.
I mean, if you're good at it and as you get better
Sure.
at it, yes, the more information you collect, the better you will be.
For sure.
Yes. Yes.
But when you're first out of the gate, people ask me, like, they'll listen to me on the phone and they'll go, "Oh my God, you're amazing on the phone." I got to tell you, I've not always been amazing on the phone.
Right.
It's taken me, I've been in this business almost 26 years. Imagine how many phone calls I've made in 26 years.
Yeah.
You go, I tell people all the time, I'm not the brightest crayon in the box. Don't get me wrong, I'm in the box.
So you're in the box. You made
I'm in
it.
the box.
You made it in the box.
I'm in the
though.
box. But you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to.
Yes.
All you have to have is, okay, I want to know what I need to collect. I need to collect, what are they asking? Why are they selling? The most important thing is, why are they selling?
Yep.
What are they asking? What do they want?
Sure.
Okay. Once you find the motivation, make the appointment.
Yes.
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 Make the appointment, because then because I can tell you that if you try too hard on that first appointment and you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get a no every time.
Right.
Every time.
Every time.
Every time.
Every time.
So if you want to learn how to be better on the phone, make the appointment. Go on the appointment. Screw the appointment up. You're going to get there, you're going to make a mess of it. Well, the next phone call you get, you're going to go, okay, I should have asked this. I needed to ask that.
Absolutely.
Now you
The
get your
only way
conversation
you're going to
going.
get better at that, I don't care who hands you a script.
Yeah.
It's the only way to get better at it. You can have a script and you can say, okay, but just jot a few things down of what you
Absolutely.
need to collect.
For
Right.
sure.
Right.
And what I tell all of my students is, write a paragraph.
Okay.
Write one sentence as the icebreaker. Because think about it.
Yeah.
That's the hardest part. When you talk to
Yeah.
a seller, the hardest part about talking to a seller is the first sentence.
Yep.
Right.
Is the
Right.
first 15 seconds you got them on the phone.
Yep.
Because they're like, who are you and why are you
I'd say
calling me?
10
I
seconds.
was
They
about to
say you
say,
got less than
who-
15.
Exactly. Who are you and why are you
Like,
calling me?
Yeah.
Which is why I said earlier, I said, look, a lot of times I'll say, look, this is going to be an unusual phone call.
Absolutely.
And they'll
Yeah.
go, oh, this
Yeah.
will make them listen
Right.
and sit
Right.
back on their heels a little bit.
Yeah.
This is going to be a little unusual phone call. My name is Don DeRosa. And now you want to get to the point.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you try to drag things out, they're like, okay, who are you? And why are you calling me? And you will lose interest fast.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So I say, it's an unusual phone call. My name is Don DeRosa, and I work with a company here in Georgia, and we work with people that are in distressed situations. I don't tell them, hey, I found out you're in foreclosure. I just say we work with people in distressed situations.
Right.
And I said, I'm calling around to see if we can help people that are in situations out of those situations and help them keep their home.
Absolutely.
And I can't tell you how many times someone will say, well, that's a different approach.
Yeah.
How are you going to do that?
Mhm.
Well, the minute they say that, now you can open up and say, well, tell me a little bit about your situation.
Right. Yeah.
Once you get to the point where you can say to them, tell me a little bit about your situation, that script means nothing anymore.
Absolutely.
Now it becomes a personalized conversation.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Now it's like, okay, tell me a little bit. And now whatever you tell me, I can play off and ask questions.
Absolutely.
If I don't ask all the right questions, don't get all the right informations, at least I'm building rapport with you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Rapport is
And
massive.
now I'm like, okay, we get to be on first names. I try to use their first name as much as possible. Or if I can tell, sometimes they like to be Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so.
Yeah.
I do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Build rapport for
Build
sure.
rapport.
Yep.
I say, tell me a little bit about how you got in this situation. I let them, and then I listen.
Yeah.
Because once I find out how they got in, then I know. So I have a little list that I'll give people that says, okay, here's all the different programs
Sure.
that you can offer them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then we'll go through the list. Hey, have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? Nope, nope, nope. Okay. Then I think what we need to do is make an appointment.
Mm-hmm.
So then I sit down with them and then I make an appointment. And, the phone call should only last 2-3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes most.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Wow.
And a good
Very
phone
efficient.
conversation, if they are really into it, could last an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you don't really want those phone calls. You want to make the appointment.
Right.
You want to get in front of them
Get there.
and then have that long conversation.
Absolutely.
Then build a rapport.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Makes sense.
That's the biggest thing. So from a marketing standpoint, back to your question,
Yeah, no,
that's a long way of.
Well, you answered it at first, but yeah.
That's a long way to
Yeah.
go.
But I think a lot of that is necessary. Now, I mean, of course, we're talking about subject two, but
Yeah.
in order to get to the point of, I mean, like you said, subject two is one of the most powerful tools that we can use in real estate. But in order to be able to get to the point of being able to utilize any of that, you got to know how to have a conversation.
Yes.
They have to trust you
Absolutely.
Yes.
because you're taking over.
That's that part right
You're
there.
taking over
Exactly.
their biggest asset they have.
Yes.
Or could be their biggest liability.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? If
Yeah.
they're upside down, it's not an asset
For sure.
anymore. But
for sure.
you're taking over that, and they're trusting that you have to make that payment.
Mhm.
Yep.
And if you can't establish that, or you haven't established that,
We just met yesterday.
exactly,
Yeah,
and
that's a lot of
you
trust,
and that's the other thing.
Yeah.
That, that could be an objection.
Yeah.
So, how do I know you're going to make my payment?
Mhm.
That's not a conversation you should be having over the phone.
Right.
That's a
Face-to-face.
conversation you should be having sitting next to them on the couch.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Gotcha.
But you don't. You just met me yesterday. But let me explain to you why, how we work and
Sure.
how we can protect that.
Definitely. Definitely.
So that's where the education, that's where the learning of kind of it's a stepping stone, right?
Sure.
You've got to learn how to get your phone to ring first, or
Right.
get someone to raise their hand.
Mhm.
Then you got to learn what to say to them. Then you got to learn how to handle the appointment. Then you got to learn the paperwork, and then
For
you got
sure.
so it's a stepping stone.
For sure. For sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So let's talk about the paperwork a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, there's a process, I imagine, that, and I'm saying these questions I'm asking from an elementary standpoint, so I got to make sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So there's a process to making the whole subject to idea happen, right? So the initial paperwork, what's the first piece of paperwork you give to them in order to be able to get to the point of purchasing the property?
Okay. So when you sit down with someone, know and understand one thing. Sellers a lot of times either A, lie,
Yeah, absolutely.
or B,
What?
simply don't know
Yeah.
Right.
their information.
For sure.
Absolutely.
They simply
For
don't
sure.
know.
For sure.
Right? So I can't tell you how many times I sat down with a seller and said, okay, well, what's your payment? I don't know. What's your interest rate? I'm not sure. How far behind are you? I don't know. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
6 months, maybe 8. I don't know. Right? So don't be surprised if you
For
walk
sure.
into someone's house and they don't know squat.
Mhm.
Right? They don't know anywhere. Do you have any of your paperwork? No, I have no idea where that is.
Right.
Wow.
Wow.
It's more common than it's not.
Yeah. Okay.
Right?
It's true.
So when you sit down with them, the first thing I do is if they're ready
Uh-huh.
and they say, okay, let's do this,
Mhm.
I will get a purchase and sale agreement signed.
Okay.
Mhm.
And kind of now, because they don't have all the documents, on that purchase and sale agreement, I have a little box on mine that says approximate.
Okay.
And then I have a little clause at the end of my contract that basically whatever comes out after that, I can adjust that price.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if it's more, I can adjust it. If it's less, I can adjust it, and it doesn't hurt me.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Okay. So then I get them to sign an authorization to release. So the two pieces of paper that I get them to sign there is an authorization to release and a purchase and sale agreement.
Okay.
Once those two documents are signed, I come back to the office, or I do it from my iPad. I can do it from right then and there. But the average person would come back, and they're going to send that authorization to the bank, because the bank won't talk to you. You can call them and try to finagle something out of them.
Right.
They will not talk to you unless they think it's the seller, and then you got to supply them with the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. Or if you've had authorization, it's like medical. We can't go in and talk to a doctor without a HIPAA thing signed,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Same thing
So
applies
the
here.
authorization to release is allowing you to have permission to speak.
The seller is signing their name to that, saying, I am authorizing Don DeRosa in this case to talk to you about my loan.
Got it,
We fax that to them. Now it's going to take a few days because the banks are not speedy about this. It takes 2, 3, sometimes more, and it may take multiple times for you to fax. They go, oh, we don't have it. Okay. So depending on if the house is in foreclosure and how much crunch time, it might be beneficial for you to have the seller call on your behalf anyways.
Yes.
And do it themselves.
Sure.
So what you're looking for is what you want to ask. And the two biggest things, especially if you're dealing with someone that's behind.
Okay.
But even if someone's not behind, you still want this information. You want to know if they're behind. You want to know there's two letters you want the bank. You want a reinstatement letter.
Okay.
And you want a payoff letter. Now, here's the mistake a lot of people make. When they ask for those letters, let's say today is the 5th, the foreclosures, October, whatever. Let's just say October 5th. For us, it's the first Tuesday of the month. So whatever that date is.
Sure.
Well, a lot of times they will make a mistake of getting that document 2 weeks out, and the payoff will be good through September 28th.
Right.
Well, if you don't close that by September 28th, you got to go back through the whole process again because that letter's outdated.
Right.
So make sure whatever you get, make sure your date good through is
long enough
within your time frame of closing.
Right.
Because what we've noticed here ever since COVID, these banks they'll tell you, oh, it takes 10 to 14 days. Well, if I'm 3 days before foreclosure, I don't have 10 to 14 days.
I can't do it. Yeah.
So you could literally screw yourself in that.
Yeah.
If that's the case. So make sure you allow yourself. So those two documents are what you need right out of the gate, signed at the seller's house.
Okay.
I also tell people to take pictures if they have their mortgage statement.
Okay.
Take screenshots of their mortgage statement. You don't need to take. I used to take that paperwork, but now I just take a photo, scan it with my phone. Because on that, it will have the loan number. It'll have a lot of the information that you need. Plus, on the back, it'll have the customer service, fax numbers, and all that stuff. Because they still deal in faxes.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
It is.
That's crazy.
So,
do you ask for any permission to any online statements that they have?
Not at this point.
Okay.
Only when I close do I get that.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. So then when you go to closing, you'll have other documents depending on how you're going to take title, depending on what you're going to do. You're going to have a power of attorney. You're going to have the CYA letter we talked about.
Definitely. Yeah.
You're going to have other letters that you get because those are at the closing table. I don't send those to the seller ahead of time because I don't want to scare them.
Right.
So they get signed at the closing table, and also they need to be notarized. So there's no sense of chasing around town getting notarized documents before the closing when you can do it right at the closing table.
So you can actually close a subject to?
I recommend closing every single one of them.
So you can go to an attorney's office and they will have you sign
In fact,
paperwork.
Andrew Gervey will do them all day long.
Shout out to Andrew Gervey. Shout out to Andrew Gervey for being the subject to guy.
Yeah, Andrew's he's an investor's friend, right?
Definitely.
He's a friendly investor attorney. So anyone that's listening that's within Georgia.
Yeah.
You know, if you want someone that does creative closes, double closes, you know, all the investor friendly closes,
Definitely investor friendly.
He's your guy. Yeah, he's your guy.
Absolutely.
Um,
So in a subject to closing, you signed the paperwork at the closing, and I want to make sure I
well,
kind
let
of
me
detail.
interrupt you for 1 second.
Okay.
The reason, years ago, like I said, I've been in this business 26 years. So when I first started, my first probably 1.5 years, maybe even 2 years, I did what we called Waffle House closings. You know what those are?
Yes, sir.
Those are.
I've been around a little while.
Yeah, exactly. So those are what we call them Waffle House closings. That's when we sit down with the seller. We exchange paperwork here. No title search was
None
done.
of that.
Nothing was like, you know,
Wow.
and then we just go record the deed.
Our
And,
contract was on a napkin.
yeah. Right? So all the stuff's
Greasy one at that,
notarized
if
at
it was.
a bank or
Right.
some
Wow.
right. Well, the problem with that, and this goes out to everybody, this is why I tell you, be careful who you listen to. This is one of the major reasons, is there's Facebook groups out there that will tell you, oh, you don't need to close
Just get
this
a quick
through an
claim deed.
attorney, or you can close this, you know, yourself, and
Right.
save the title fees, save the.
Oh wow.
That's a big mistake.
Right.
And here's the number one reason why. Is when you close through a title company or an attorney, depending on what state you're in, you're going to be a title company or an attorney. Like here in Georgia, we're attorney states. So everything's closed through an attorney's office here. That gives you an arm's length transaction.
Right.
That means that you and I, if you're the seller and I'm the buyer,
Right.
we have no prior relationships. We're
Right.
not cousins. We're not
Right.
family. We're not friends. We're
Right.
nothing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we've got a third party that has basically fulfilled that obligation.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So now what happens, and why is that so important? Because if you all of a sudden now go out and file bankruptcy 4 years down the road,
Right.
2 years down the road, and now I'll tell you, if you're going to file bankruptcy, please let me know.
Sure.
But if you forget,
Yeah.
all right, this house is out of sight, out of mind for you now,
Yeah.
and you forget, the minute you file bankruptcy, guess what? That's on your credit report.
Right.
Okay, so if I'm the one selling it, and let's say I have a lease option tenant in there, and you
Yeah.
file bankruptcy, and then all of a sudden, because you include it in your bankruptcy, because it's
This
on your
property.
credit report,
Yeah. That property.
you've just frozen this property.
Yeah.
Okay, so what will happen is I'll get notice, but in the meantime, if he comes and tries to buy it, I can't sell it to
You
him
can't sell it now.
Right.
because it's wrapped up in bankruptcy. So when that happens,
Yeah.
I now have to go to the bankruptcy court, to the judge, and my attorney can represent me and say, Your Honor, this was an arm's length transaction, or they'll get with a trustee, who
Sure.
depending, and they'll say, here's all the documents, here's
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
They will give them the debt. At least my experience has been, they will relieve them of the debt, but release the home.
Sure. Sure.
They'll include it long enough to relieve the debt, but then the judge will release the home because it was an arm's length transaction.
Yeah.
Okay, and the payments have been made, and so on and so forth.
happened prior to the
It will
bankruptcy.
keep that out of their bankruptcy so that he can still buy the house. The bank doesn't have to do anything
Yeah.
different, and they're in their ways.
Right.
But if you don't have that, if you go down and do a Waffle House closing, you're screwed. In fact, I have a friend of mine who basically, I'm not going to name names, but that's a common practice. And I made
Even
a comment.
to this day.
Even to this day, I made a comment on his. Somebody was making comments about just doing.
Can I say his name?
Nope.
I'm
Waffle
just kidding.
Waffle
I'm
House
just,
closing.
I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna do
Waffle
that.
House closing. And what happened was,
But it is a he though, right?
It is a
Right.
but here's the
How tall
other
is
thing.
he?
A lot of times, and this is the other thing I need to warn people. Please don't wholesale subject to. Please do not wholesale subject to.
Tell us why.
Well,
Tell us why.
well. Okay, tell
There's
us why.
exceptions to this
Okay.
rule. I'm going to explain to you the only way you should do it.
Uh-huh.
Okay, because so let me go back for a second. So
Okay.
let me tell you the quick story.
Yeah.
So I made a comment. You should do formal closings. You go to Andrew, it's going to be a little more than $1,000
Right.
to have that protection. You get title insurance, you get arm's length transaction, it's just well worth every penny that you
Absolutely.
spend. Okay, for that protection. So that aside, I was kind of explaining that into a post. I got attacked like you wouldn't believe, right? Like I'm like, okay, fine. The very
what group was this in?
No, not gonna tell you.
Fishing today.
The very next week, the person in that group came to me and said, Don, they're the owner of that group, came to me and says, Don, I got a problem. He bought my materials years and years ago. And he's doing quite well for himself. Bought my material. And he can't call me and says, Don, I got a problem. I said, okay, what's that? He's like, well, I bought a house subject to from this woman. I wholesaled it to someone. They reinstated the loan of like 20 grand, or maybe one was I think it was 20 grand to reinstate it, or 40 grand. This was a big number, right? To reinstate it, and then gave him his wholesale. So I think he made 20 grand on the wholesale deal, and then the investor sent like 40 grand to the bank to reinstate the loan. And they didn't do an arm's length transaction. Well, then the woman filed bankruptcy. Well, the bankruptcy trustee came in, looked at that and said, nope, I'm going to take you to court for fraud to the woman. Well, the woman panicked and says, oh, I can't do this. We're reversing all this stuff. Well, by then he called me and says, what do I do? I said, well, give the woman give the investor, because now the investor doesn't have a house to buy.
Right.
He's got $40,000-$50,000 tied up in this and doesn't own a house.
Wow.
And I said, give the investor back the fee. He goes, well, I already spent it. The assignment fee or whatever.
It's typical for wholesalers.
And I said, well, you're never going to get the money back from the lender, because they're not going to give that money back.
Right.
So whatever money he paid to reinstate that, well, now this woman has a house that's been reinstated. She's backing out of the transaction because, if he doesn't allow that, now it's a crime. Now she's getting charged with fraud.
Right.
Because the trustee didn't believe that the arm's length transaction, or that the transaction was real.
Right.
She thought, or he thought, she was giving it to a relative and trying to get around the bankruptcy. Yeah. So that was, and I'm like, sorry, dude, I told you not to do that. And it was ironic because I had just had that conversation.
And what'd you say his name was?
So what happened to the investor?
I have no idea. I never heard from him after that. I don't know what happened after that.
And this was in what group again?
So the other thing I tell people that story. So I tell people, don't wholesale subject to deals. Because think about it. If I sit down with you and you're the homeowner and I promise to make your payments, okay, we got this great relationship. You're trusting me. Well, if I go out there and I market this thing as a subject to deal, and I wholesale it to Glenn,
who didn't promise
anything. I barely even know Glenn, if I know him at all. But he's got the $30,000 that I want as the assignment fee, or $10,000, or whatever the number is. There's two problems there. Number one, if I don't know him, so if he makes a mistake and stops making payments because he's like, screw it, I don't know these people. If he runs into any kind of hardship and he stops making payments, your credit's screwed. Or, I mean, they could destroy your hold forever. So now when you get angry, who are you calling?
Because
you're calling me. So if you don't get the resolution, you're going to get the law. You're going to call the 5 o'clock news. You're going to call the attorney general. You're going to do whatever you need to do.
For sure.
And who's in the middle of this?
You.
Me. But I'm going to say, well, wait a minute. I didn't do any of that. I wholesaled it to Glenn. Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
You're in the chain.
I had a similar situation like that.
Hold on, let me finish.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So if you're going to do that, if you're going to wholesale deals, you can do it. I don't recommend it, but before you close, before you sit down at Andrew's table, you get Glenn. Glenn says, yes, I'm going to give you whatever the assignment is. The other thing that Glenn won't have is when I sit down with you, I'll have a power of attorney with you. I'll have all CYA letter. I'll have all the documents that I need to service that loan.
Right.
Well, if I wholesale it to him, guess what? He doesn't know you.
Right.
He doesn't have any of those documents.
Right.
He doesn't have any of those documents. So he's at a disadvantage. I had one guy in Florida did that. He literally did it on a napkin. The house almost foreclosed because he didn't have, he paid the payments every month. Well, a year into this thing, he got a foreclosure notice. Well, because he didn't have any documentations to service the loan. Their escrow went up, their taxes and insurance went up, so his payment went up. He didn't know it.
But he didn't know.
Right.
So he was paying $1,000 when his new payment was $1,200, and it took him a year before the bank caught up to that and said, "Okay, now you're 2 payments behind. We're going to start foreclosing." Well, he was like, "I was." And that's because you don't have the right paperwork.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do a wholesale deal, do it before the closing. And when you come to the closing and I come to the closing, you need to be at the closing. And, I'll say, Kenneth, meet Glenn.
Yeah.
Glenn's going to take my position. I'm backing out of this transaction.
Right.
Okay. He's my partner. Or he's a partner on this. I'm no longer going to be part of this.
So is there a document that can be put in place?
You can, and you could probably draw something up that
says
says
the end buyer is now.
but all the paperwork, all the power of attorneys and all that stuff now gets signed by you two.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
I'm just getting an assignment on the HUD.
For sure.
Yes.
So all the paperwork now is signed by the parties that need to be signed.
Right.
That's the only way. A lot of times people will close and then try to wholesale it to somebody else, or they'll put it into a trust and they'll sign beneficial interest over to that person. That's more of an advanced thing for any of you that are listening.
Right.
Let that go on.
Yeah.
Let that one go over your head. That happens.
Yeah. It does.
And that's a mistake.
Is it a benefit to doing it in a trust and then signing the beneficial interest?
Only if you know the person and can trust the person to make those payments. Because if you don't, you run into the same thing because that person doesn't make the payments. Who are you coming after? You're coming after me.
Yeah,
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
And once I give my ownership away, I have no control over that.
I'm out of it. Yeah.
Now, if you want to do stuff like that, there's other things you can do. I can buy it subject to from you, and then I can tone around and do a wraparound mortgage with you.
Right.
So I stay in the middle, even though it's like you pay me $1,000, I pay you $1,000 type thing.
Right. Yeah.
Or vice versa, But there are plenty of things you can do. Subject to is very, very powerful. It can make you a lot of money, but it can also destroy lives if you're not careful and you don't do it right.
Yes.
Agreed.
I made a mistake. Not made a mistake. Well, it turned out to be a mistake. I bought a house subject to, from someone that was wholesaling it to me. So I bought it subject to, took it over. Everything was fine. Worked out a deal with a partner. We were doing some other transactions. So I worked out a deal with the partner. I said, okay, this property, I'll sign it over to you. Sign over the trust to this person.
Beneficial interest, right?
And he stopped making the payments.
There you go.
So I have firsthand experience. And, the person the wholesaler brought it to me and introduced me to the homeowner. And me and the homeowner, we were good until that person stopped making those payments. And he was calling me like, hey, what did you do? What happened?
You're
and
in
I'm
the cold.
Yeah.
You're in the cold.
Yeah.
So if you have something like that, there's other things that can be done, like holding that beneficial interest in trust or have an agreement that if they don't make the payments, you have another beneficial interest giving it back to you.
Absolutely.
As long as there's agreed upon, there's ways to do this.
Right.
But you got to be very careful
Absolutely.
you're playing with people's lives here.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And before you knew it, when he stopped making those payments, I don't know that it ever went into foreclosure, but it did affect the guy's credit.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, so what you're explaining is absolutely right. It's 100% real life stuff.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I think people who, well, first of all, I'm gonna talk about the group that you're talking about. I
Uh-oh.
read some of the comments about stuff like that. And that's taught. It's taught to wholesale subject to.
It is.
Yeah.
Is
I'm like-
after the show, I'll tell you which group, and I think we're talking about two different groups here.
I don't know.
We'll see.
I don't know. So
There's several out there.
there's
several
quite
out
a
there.
few. There's quite a
And
few.
you know, I mean, it's just like what was the
Is it the same one that Andrew was talking about?
No.
Oh, okay. This is different. Okay.
No.
Okay.
So there's
All
But it's a very similar problem in that group, but that's not where that example came from.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right. So we're going to tell us the name of the group?
No.
Still trying to get the group in the name.
Hey, listen, that is a steel trap.
No.
It's not telling anything.
No.
So in closing, and as we wrap up, I want to ask, so we know what Facebook groups not to go to.
No, we don't. He didn't tell us.
I'm not gonna tell you that.
Okay, so let's stay on Facebook in general.
So we
Those
know where
subject to
not go.
Facebook groups.
Right.
Is what
right.
he said. Those subject to Facebook groups.
But what books or courses have you all, both of you all, read or been a part of that you found very beneficial in getting the knowledge that you needed to take down problems?
Don DeRosa's course.
That's a great question. I'll tell you how I learned.
Okay.
I mean, I'll tell you where I got all my information. Of course, I have information for 25 years. I have 22 different courses on 22 different subjects.
Okay.
Okay.
Where can
Subject
those be
2
found?
is just one of those.
Where can those courses be found?
Well, if you're here in the Atlanta market, I would invite you to our weekly Wednesday meeting. You guys should come.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've been a
tomorrow-
couple times.
It's tonight, actually,
tonight.
7 p.m.
Where?
You know what? I think I'll be there.
1960 Satellite Boulevard. It's at the
It's
Keller
different.
Williams building.
Okay.
In
Behind
Duluth.
Marlowe's Tavern.
Yep.
Okay.
So 7 p.m.
Okay.
I have a coaching program that lasts the whole year long.
Okay.
Okay. We cover everything, not just subject to.
Sure.
But I also have a subject to course, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera. But if you want to get more information, you can go to either ppgcoaching.com,
Okay.
ppgcoaching.com, or expertrealestatecoaching.com.
Okay. Awesome.
But come, anyone that's listening, if you want to come tonight, by all means, 7 p.m. Park in the back.
Yeah.
We go from 7 to 9 every Wednesday.
Okay.
And your entry fee tonight is on me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
This guy.
But when I first came up, I learned
Yes.
from Ron LeGrand.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Heard his name a couple times.
Ron's been around for
40 something
yeah,
years.
he's been around for a long time.
So who was Ron LeGrand's coach?
That's a good question. I don't know. That's a good
I
question.
think it was Carlton Sheets.
It may have been.
Yeah.
It may
Yeah.
have been. My first course I ever bought was Carlton Sheets
Mine
back
too.
in
Yeah.
1991.
Wow. Bought in 91. I bought
Bought in
mine in
91.
95.
Bought in 91.
96.
Sat on the shelf. Thought it got it.
I was
Yeah.
still in middle school.
Bought it in 91 at 3:00 in the morning. Got it a couple days later. Set it out on the floor. Thought I was going to be the next millionaire.
Oh my goodness.
Next millionaire in 30 days, right?
That's the same thing happened to me.
Right? So I put it back together. I was all happy. I was like a kid at Christmas.
Yeah.
Put it back on the shelf. Didn't pick it up again until 1997.
Oh wow. Oh wow.
You deferred your millions.
Didn't pick it up again until 1997.
That's what you
Yep.
call delayed gratification.
7.
Yep. Started listening to it. Didn't really agree with because at the time I didn't have bad credit. I had good credit, but I was afraid to use my credit.
Sure.
Mhm.
Sure.
That's most
And
people are.
I
Yeah.
had a good
Yeah.
job, but I was afraid to spend money for fear. What happens if this stuff doesn't work?
Right. Right.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And that course kind of taught you to leverage using banks. And I was, I don't really like
Okay.
the idea of putting loans in my name.
Mhm.
And somebody introduced as I was going through that again, someone introduced Ron LeGrand, and back in the day was George Ria.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
said, go see him. And so I joined the local real estate group
Yeah.
and saw Ron, and went to his Saturday event, paid.
I did all the same things.
Paid $1,500 for his red, blue, and green course.
Yes.
Didn't
That's
tell
why
my
I'm almost as smart as you. I
Didn't
went to
tell
this-
my wife I bought either one of those courses.
$1,500 back in '97.
Oh yes.
wow.
Now back then there was a lot of money. Well, no,
Yeah.
not in '97 for me. I didn't
Yeah.
get around to learn Lagan until I want to say 2003, 2002,
Yeah,
2003.
so back then it wasn't
That's-
cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back
So
then.
I've been part of Atlanta RIA now for better part of
Long time.
15 years. I don't even know how long. I don't even know when.
How
they
long is it?
started.
How long it's been?
I was just gonna say.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't know
been
how long
it's about at least
around,
almost 20 years. at
But
least, yeah.
we got a meeting coming up soon. So
Yeah.
first Monday of I think it's second Monday of every month.
And that's this coming Monday, right?
You said the second Monday.
Second Monday,
Yeah,
whatever that is.
Yeah, this coming Monday. It's,
I'll have to
tell
look
the folks
that up.
what's happening
Yep,
at,
coming
at
up
the
on
coming up
11th.
meeting. What's happening at the
That's the
Um,
11th.
It's the 11th.
The
Yeah.
11th.
September 11th?
September.
September 11th.
Oh,
I speak
I don't
at
have
5
to take.
o'clock.
I don't
so-
have to take a plane there, do I?
No.
I'm just kidding. I'm just-
So if you guys come, I
Nobody
speak
will
at
get
5
that.
o'clock. I usually do what we call the meeting before the meeting.
do you still teach on the technology?
Yeah, depends on whatever the topic is.
What's
Like,
the
sometimes it's
AI tool that they're using for
Chat GPT?
yeah for property searches? There's
Oh, I don't know.
There's
what
a-
property searches.
there's a new AI tool
Oh, really?
Ooh.
Quote,
that
unquote.
yeah
I
that
don't
that's
know.
being
I'm unfamiliar
marketed.
with that. I'm I'm heavily involved in AI. I've done several classes on AI.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Remarkable stuff.
Absolutely,
great.
I mean,
absolutely.
if any of you are listening and hasn't heard of or done anything with Chat GPT,
What are you doing?
That's life changing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
what are you
listen,
doing?
I got it right here.
That's seriously, that's life-changing.
It is. It is.
I mean,
So-
I do it for everything. I gotta. So I don't know how much time we got, but
Go ahead.
I was
go ahead,
downtown. I was down in Atlanta, and I was with a friend of mine, and we pulled up to a parking spot. We were going to go eat lunch, and it was kind of obscure. I'm like, I wonder if this is the right parking spot.
Mhm.
And there was a police officer right standing in front of us. So
Mhm.
I said, asked him if I'm okay parking here. He said, okay. Yeah, you're good parking there.
Mhm.
So we went in and we ate. I paid for parking, put my little tag up in the whole 9 yards.
Mhm.
Came back an hour later and I had a ticket for $75. Now, normally, if I was in the wrong, I would just stroke check, paid the ticket, and
Right,
been done with
right,
it. But I was
yeah.
like, you know what? It's a matter of principle now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So if I hadn't asked the police officer and he hadn't
Sure.
said yes, I would have probably parked somewhere else because I thought it was questionable.
right.
Sure.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
where the sign was angled and it looked like a spot, but I didn't know.
Mhm.
So, anyways, I went on and I said, okay, the guy that was with me, I don't want him. He's from Tennessee, so I didn't want him to come down from Tennessee to go to court because I said, you know what, I want to go to court for this.
Okay.
Fighting it.
I mean, $75. I'm like, it's really not worth my time. But I'm like,
But it's principle, though.
It's
I
principle.
listen. I get
Principle, like I
it.
said. And so I had ChatGPT. I said, I gave him one sentence,
Yeah.
and it wrote an entire affidavit
Yep.
that
Yeah.
basically I emailed to him and sent back within 10 seconds.
Really?
It was as accurate as I could ever write it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was professionally written like Andrew wrote it.
Absolutely. That's something else.
And I was like, all right, this is game.
Yeah.
I mean, anytime
Yeah.
you use stuff like that, that's game changing
Absolutely.
stuff.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But yeah, if anybody wants to know any more, just go to DonDeRosa.com, and that's my link tree.
Mhm.
So you can get to anything that I have, DonDeRosa.com.
And the
Got it,
meeting
got
you
it.
said on the 11th was where is it?
Check the Atlanta Rio website. I don't know the address. It's
Isn't that Presidential
it's-
Parkway?
it is
anymore?
Presidential Parkway, but at 30. I
Just
don't-
give us the website again.
Yeah, AtlantaRia.com.
That's Atlanta REIA.com.
.com.
Yeah.
Yep. That's on the 11th, and then tonight or every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday, I do it 1960 Satellite Boulevard. It's at the Keller Williams building.
Okay.
When you come up, I forget the name of the building, but go around the back. And there'll be a set of doors right there. When you come in those doors, the training room's right there on your left.
On the left.
So we can park in the back, right?
Park in the back.
Okay. Now you said we park in the back. If I get a ticket, then
No, you won't get a
You got to write me an affidavit.
In fact, I can even park in the low emissions stall with my vehicle.
Yeah, me
There's
too.
Nobody's there.
Me
There's
too.
nobody's there.
I might have to drive my little emissions car too.
Yeah.
And actually, his affidavit is saved in ChatGPT because it remembers all of your
All
Yes.
of that.
All of your,
Yes.
I guess.
Okay,
prompts.
ChatGPT needs to get a search feature. So you
Oh,
can,
it's already there.
it's a search feature?
What do you mean?
Wait a minute. I don't find a way to search old. I mean, I know I could go back and look, but can I actually type
there's
in?
a search in there. I'm pretty sure.
Within.
I think there's a search. I don't know. I haven't
Really?
So, well, what's your question? You're saying to search within your prompts?
Previous ones?
In your previous prompts.
I don't know. I haven't.
I don't,
You could be right.
Because I can go through all of the ones that I've done.
You
but
could be right.
Yeah,
You
I
could be
can't
right.
actually search.
You
Yeah.
could be right.
All right, let's
We'll check it out.
maybe I'll write the AI program that fixes that.
Yeah.
Somebody else is working on it already. You already put it out there. Somebody else working on it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I was asked the question. I was like, that's going to take a lot of jobs, and I said, what it's going to do is it's going to change a lot of jobs.
It's going to change a lot of jobs.
And create.
It's going to change. It's not going to. It's going to take. It already.
It's definitely going to take
Yes.
jobs.
It already
Yes.
has.
Yes.
I mean, if you're a script writer or you're a copywriter,
yes.
it has literally taken business right off your plate.
Yeah.
I mean, literally.
The one thing I would say is because that's been the biggest concern for a lot of people for a long time. Oh, it's going to take a lot of jobs. But if you start to learn to use it and start to,
it's just going to create them.
Yeah,
Create different ones. It's just going to create
different jobs. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, they tell you in college, like they said, all the jobs that you're training for now in college don't even exist.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And think about it. Think about how many employees McDonald's has gotten rid of because they have the machines in there that
so as you walk in,
learn to fix the machines.
Well, think about it. Think about it. Though.
Right.
I mean, it's going to continue to get that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because, I mean, people ask me all the time, where's the economy going? That's a whole other subject.
Yeah.
That's a whole other thing.
I think Don just invited himself back on the show to talk about that.
Where's the economy going?
But I mean, every single indicator I've experienced in the last 25 years indicates that we should be in a crap show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
You're right. You're absolutely right.
But we're not.
And that's the interesting thing. Like a lot of people don't get it though. They're talking about, interest rates are up. Yeah, we're lucky interest rates are at 20% now.
When my sister bought her house many, many years ago, she was at 18.5%.
I bought my first place, it was at 18%. Yeah.
You had two.
No. That was the second one.
Oh,
the first place I bought in Detroit.
Yeah. My first house I bought was 8.5%. But here's the problem though. The problem is we didn't have the appreciation rate like we do now. I mean, think about it. The average home price in Atlanta right now. You know what it is?
About 400,000.
480.
480.
Yep.
Wow.
480.
It's crazy.
You know the average income?
It's crazy.
45, 50,000.
70.
Wow.
So what does that tell you? I heard on, I don't know, one of the news shows just a couple days ago.
Oh, you watched the news? No, I'm just kidding.
Not really.
I
just happened to. Actually, somebody put it on Expert Real Estate Coaching as a Instagram post from one of the news shows, and it says the average person to buy a house today in Atlanta needs to make $113,000 or $118,000 with zero debt.
Wow.
To be able to afford an average home.
Wow.
That's intense.
So think about that. You got two people with 70 grand.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have two people making $70,000.
Yeah.
To afford an average home with no debt.
No debt.
Virtually no debt.
Student loans. Nothing.
Right. Nothing.
Like, come on.
None of that. Right.
So how long can that go?
Not very long. But somehow, though, inventory is still low.
Well, that's because, all right, I'll tell you why. Because banks aren't releasing them.
Okay.
I mean, pre-COVID, I gave you a statistic that I'm familiar with. Pre-COVID, we would go into a subject to seller's home, and the average price that they would be behind, $5,000, $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 tops.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That we'd have to reinstate.
Yeah.
Post-COVID, now we're going into homes that they're $80,000, $100,000 behind on their mortgage.
Wow.
Now, here's another statistic. You have a seller's market a balanced market and a buyer's market.
Right.
Okay. In Georgia, pre-COVID, in a balanced market, pre-foreclosures should be somewhere on average, month to month to month for the state of Georgia, should be somewhere around 35 to 3,800 foreclosures per month.
Mm-hmm.
That's on a balanced market.
Right.
Now we're considered a balanced market, swinging one way or the other. We have on average 1,200.
Wow.
1,200. So that means that there are
Interesting.
so many other homes that aren't being made, that aren't being paid. They're in some form of governmental process, whether they're being modified, whether they're being a forbearance, and that's all coming to an end.
So it's gonna come to an end.
Yeah.
Too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Student loans are coming due this month, coming October.
Wow.
Interest rates are still climbing.
Not to mention your Airbnb people who's going to be selling.
Exactly. Airbnb people are going to be selling. Everything's slowing down now.
Yeah. Wow.
So there are so many indicators that now the only indicator that helps contradict that is we're not keeping pace with building homes. There's more people moving into Atlanta than we are building. More, they're not seeing the permits being put out, stuff out of the ground. They're not keeping pace with the number of people. That's a very good problem for Atlanta.
Yeah.
That means there's more people moving in than there are. So that's going to continue to possibly drive up prices.
Yes. Wow. Interesting.
Let's start building. Let's go.
Yeah. All right. Listen, this has been. Yeah, Don, we gotta have you back, man. We definitely gotta have you back. Listen, thank you for stopping by. You've given us some great information today. It's interesting, folks are watching. We hadn't gotten any questions. I guess that's what happens when you have somebody as smart as you, man, to be able to tell the details of everything. But for those of you all that catch the show,
as interesting as we thought.
Right.
So one way or the other, right?
But I will say, subject to has been. This is going to be the topic and the technique. If you don't know how to do it, you're missing the boat.
You know what? I was about to wrap up, but I got to mention this thing, though. And this is what I was actually going here earlier about Atlanta being because you kind of gave an indication of the amount of pre-foreclosures being down and that slowly transitioning. And then we're talking about we had a conversation a few weeks ago about what's commonly known as the Burr method. I can't wrap this show without having that part of the conversation.
That's how we ended last
right.
Yeah.
And I was going here earlier, so if y'all sticking around, thank you. If you catch the show later, make sure you fast forward to this part. The Burr method being the method that has been taught for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Now, in Atlanta, the question I have to ask is, do you still see that as a viable option?
I never saw it as a viable
Me
option.
either, because the whole 1% never set well with me.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. Okay, let me set the record straight. I'm not a fan of putting loans in your name.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of. That's why I've done hundreds of subject twos, and that's why I'm not a fan of going to traditional banks and things like that and boxing myself in that. God forbid. I tell people in all the seminars I do, don't look down on people that are in foreclosure, because if the hardship is big enough, every one of us can be in that, in their shoes.
Absolutely.
If the hardship is big enough, I don't care how much money you make. I don't care who you are. Look at Donald Trump. If he keeps going the way he's going, that poor guy's going to be broke with all the legal bills he's got.
Right. Absolutely.
So if that hardship is big enough, you can be
in
their shoes.
You're absolutely right.
So I'm not a fan of putting loans in my name.
And just 1 second. That's with everything, though. That's
Sure.
with everything.
Because we all go through our stuff, right? So
Me, I never go through
This guy.
anything
This
ever.
guy.
God, I'm just playing. I'm just playing.
Right. He's like, oh,
I
really? Oh,
I don't
okay.
need no tests. I don't need no
Right,
tests.
right.
Slide over here.
Right, exactly.
Sit next to you.
I'm just joking.
It just-
Closer to her.
And it goes
It was
back
a struggle
to,
getting here today.
right? See? Get yourself together. But it just goes back to whether you're in foreclosure, pre-foreclosure, whatever. You just don't know what people are going through. So
Yes.
always approach people with great intentions
Yes.
and always lead with love, because
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, you don't know. None of us know where our lives are going to lead us, and also all we can control is today, this moment, and how we approach the next person. So sorry, go ahead.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. It's like, I mean,
It's
been
cliche,
treat
but it
people
is.
like you want to be treated.
Absolutely.
Yeah, facts.
Hey, that's the the biblical principle.
Yeah,
you know,
we always said
the law of
have a different
reciprocity.
saying of the
Man.
golden rule, like he who has the
Yeah,
gold makes the
makes
rules.
the rules.
But
Yeah.
the reality of it is,
It is. Yeah.
treat
Yeah.
others like you want to be treated.
That's
And
it.
that's how that's me.
That's
That's
real
who I am.
stuff.
So
Yeah.
I'd love to see you guys tonight if you guys want to come.
Definitely.
For
Definitely.
sure.
Well, I'll
No,
definitely
thanks for
make
the
it out.
invite, for sure.
So if you're watching, honey, I'm not gonna be able.
Uh-oh.
I'm not gonna make it home tonight.
B.
I mean, I'm making it home tonight,
I was
but
about to
I'm gonna be
say,
late.
what?
I'm gonna be late.
You are going home.
I am going home, but I'm gonna be late.
Yeah.
But listen, thank y'all for watching. Don, thank you for being here, man. I
pleasure.
certainly appreciate it.
That was
And
everything.
Thank you.
listen,
Thank you.
I wanna definitely commend you, because we just had a conversation a couple weeks ago, and I said, Don, you're gonna be on the show. You was like, okay, I'll be there.
Yeah.
And then you confirmed today, so I want to say thank you very much.
For sure.
I know you. I mean, I know you're a man of your word, but I want to thank you for being here today, and thank you for sharing the information with us.
My pleasure. Anytime you want. Like I said, I'm an open book.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I'm an open
And shout out to Ace.
Appreciate
Shout
it.
out to Ace
Appreciate
hanging in with me and co-hosting and doing your thing.
Yeah, shout out
She
to
gonna be
you.
by herself next week.
Oh, no.
By yourself.
I don't know.
I'm just joking. I'm
This
just
is good
joking.
news to me.
No.
I'm just joking.
But no.
But listen, thank y'all for continuing to watch the show. Thank you for continuing to support the show.
Absolutely.
And we do this again as a labor of love. We want to continue to share information and continue to educate people, so the business of real estate will be better for us all.
Absolutely.
So thank y'all for tuning in. And if you catch it on the replay, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Yep.
And if you're catching it now, don't forget to come out to the class tonight at PPG at the Keller Williams building in
1960 Satellite Boulevard.
1960 Satellite Boulevard. Don't forget to come and check that out. I've been there before, and I know it's a wealth of information. And I don't know if you, I'm not gonna talk
Anybody's welcome. Come. I mean, just come.
for the year training that he offers. I think you need to raise the price. I'm just gonna say that.
Everybody says that.
But he gives you a full year of training, and it's awesome information. So definitely come and check out, a snippet of it tonight, and definitely look be a part of PPG. All right, have yourselves a great day, and I look
Great
forward to
week.
checking
Let's
y'all out
get it.
next week.
See y'all next week.